Dispenser going up. Well, I guess that'll do.
So for those of you who didn't already know, for the last 14 months or so, I've been maintaining a group of custom TF2 servers that I called Untitled. I advertised its existence in a few of my videos when it launched, and I've mentioned it in passing a couple more times since then. Untitled started out as an experiment, eventually becoming a permanent mainstay within my core community, and as of about 6 months ago, has since evolved into one of the most populated TF2 community servers in the entire game. And all I ever really did was decide the rule set and map pool, give the thing a couple shoutouts, and nowadays all I really do is keep the bills paid. So how did this happen? Why are people still playing on Untitled? Well, hopefully this video will serve as an explanation for those questions, as well as provide a bit of backstory to how the servers came to be, and why I believe that despite my hands-off approach to both maintaining the servers and promoting it, Untitled continues and will continue to grow in popularity alongside the community servers like it. So the story begins back in May of last year when I was approached by my friend John about the possibility of hosting a public TF2 server. Now John and I have been friends for a few years, mostly because of Minecraft, of all things. Way back when I used to stream on Twitch, I sometimes played Minecraft, and I eventually wanted to set up a public server on which my Twitch subscribers could join me and the rest of my community. However, as far as server administration goes, I am admittedly entirely uneducated, and I have no idea what I'm doing, so I was approached by John, who was a frequent viewer of my streams and happened to be very well versed in how to set up and maintain a public Minecraft server from the back end that wasn't going to lag and crash all the time. John offered to volunteer his time to handle the administration side of my Minecraft server so that I could just focus on streaming and, just playing the game, which was very generous of him. Eventually, after I had decided to quit streaming on Twitch, that Minecraft server had become more of my own private thing, and yet John still provides administration help for when I get the itch to mine some diamonds with my friends. Anyway, fast forward to May 2020, and John is asking me if I'm still considering hosting a public TF2 server, something that I'd expressed interest in the past. John had figured that while it was his first foray into TF2 server administration, he was likely experienced in the basic gist of it to at least get one up and running, and we could just go from there. All I would really need to do is purchase the server and populate it with players. The two things about server administration that I feel like I can actually handle, Now, at this point, there was a lot of things going on. The bot crisis was in full swing. I was personally getting particularly burned out with casual mode, and I honestly was feeling pretty selfish. I just wanted to play TF2, I didn't want to have to also be gambling against the possibility of running into cheaters or experiencing the little things that I dislike about TF2 all the time. And here was an opportunity to make my own ideal space to play my favorite game in. So, that's what we did. We found an affordable hosting service with decent hardware, bought a server, installed TF2 on it, and the possibilities from there were pretty much up to me. Now, before I could release the server to everyone and broadcast an IP to my audience, I had to decide what kind of rule set I wanted, what kind of server I wanted my servers to be, because like I said, this was very much a selfish endeavor. If I was going to be the manager of my own TF2 server, I felt like I wanted to be playing on my own TF2 server all the time. My thoughts had wandered back to the first time that I had attempted to host community servers using my own resources, and unfortunately from the very beginning of that project, I was convinced by the server admin at the time that server mods, custom game modes, and promoting the server through events and meet and greets was the best way to get players in the door. I personally do not like those kinds of servers, so I obviously didn't really want to play on them, despite owning them and consistently advertising that it was where I played TF2 with my community. Unsurprisingly, those servers failed very quickly, and while it was disappointing at the time, I'm still glad that it happened because I learned a lot about what not to do. So as a result, from the very beginning of Untitled, I vowed that my servers would always provide an experience that I personally enjoy about TF2. So right off the bat, obviously, I removed random crits and random bullet spread.
See, this is why we play on Untitled.
Easiest decision of my life. I feel like I don't have to explain myself here. I've done it a dozen times by now, but I was confident that there are more than enough people in the TF2 community who would approve of or be indifferent to the removal of random crits and spread, that the change would not discourage very many people from playing on the servers. The next change that I wanted to implement, however, I had the complete opposite amount of confidence in being accepted by most players, and I had every expectation that it would be the most complained about rule set on Uncletopia by far, class limits. So, just to explain myself, believe it or not, TF2 is actually a pretty well-balanced game, all things considered. I don't really think that that's up for debate. Really, it's just true. TF2, if you consider how many weapons are in this game, how many class interactions there are, TF2 is surprisingly balanced. And I personally believe that TF2 is at its best when there is a relatively even spread of every role on a team, because that's how the game was designed. Admittedly, there are definitely times when stacking a ludicrous amount of one class is a funny meme, but it's a meme that I've seen 100 times already, and honestly, its novelty wears off really quickly. But the sweet spot of frustration towards no class limits in casual mode has always been when there are 4 or more of one power class on a team, like soldiers, heavies, or demomen, and on the flip side, when your team has 4 or more spies or snipers, you're pretty much destined to have a bad time. Not to mention, I've always been of the controversial-ish opinion that stacking engineers on payload last points is legitimately busted and should not be so easy to pull off, so I had a hunch that at least trying class limits might at least teach me something. So I settled on applying a class limit of 3 per team, expecting things to go terribly wrong in ways that I hadn't even imagined, expecting everyone on the server to instantly complain to me about it. But to my surprise, a class limit of 3 is actually a pretty reasonable way to ensure that most people get to play the class that they want, while also preventing team class balance from getting out of whack and muddying the experience for everyone. Hardly anyone in the past year has complained to me about the class limits, and while I haven't kept a running tally, I would estimate that more people complain about the servers always being full than any particular rule implemented on Uncletopia, which was surprising to me. Uncletopia has been class limit 3 the entire time. It's contributed to a much more fun and balanced TF2 experience as a result, and I think most players have seen the effects firsthand. Uncletopia has remained class limit 3 the entire time it's been a thing. It's contributed to a much more fun and balanced TF2 experience as a result, and I think most players have seen the effects firsthand. Another rule I wanted to implement that I felt was necessary but might be considered a tad harsh to some was the ping limit. Now, basically what that means is that if you are physically too far away from the server, for example, say the server is located in California, but you are connecting from Egypt, chances are you will be automatically kicked from Uncletopia using a plugin. At first, the ping limit was set to 180 so that the odd European might be able to join, but we eventually worked its way down to 150 after more servers were made available in more locations. The reason behind this isn't to punish people for being far away, it's entirely because of the simple fact that it's never fun to play against laggy players in any video game, but especially TF2. TF2 is fast-paced, it requires split-second accuracy, and so many things in the game depend on latency to work correctly, such as backstabs, headshots, rockets, grenades, melee hit registration, you name it. Being unable to hit someone, or even accidentally hitting someone because they're rubber banding all over the place, is frustrating for everyone involved. And I'm also aware that there are some TF2 players out there who play with high ping no matter what they're doing. They could be playing in the same room as the server itself and they'd still be lagging all over the place, all because their PC is just absolute garbage. And I don't think it's fair to expect people to be okay with that when they're playing against someone whose hitbox registration is like playing roulette. I completely understand that not everyone can afford a high-tier gaming PC, and to be fair, the hardware requirements on TF2's Steam page still refer to the 2007 version of the game and can essentially be considered over a decade out of date, but I'd compare the undeserved entitlement of some of these players who expect not to be kicked when their PC can't handle running the game in any capacity to if I were to get upset that the Indy 500 won't let me enter the race with a Honda Civic. There's a barrier of entry to doing almost everything, and for online video games, that barrier is to have the appropriate equipment. So if you don't have the hardware, you can't participate, and that's just the truth of it, no matter how harsh it might seem to some. Alright, I got that off my chest. Let's move on to some of the less flashy rules that I decided to add, starting with disabling sprays. I think sprays, as a concept, is a fun idea, but in practice, it's pretty much guaranteed that someone is going to ruin it for everyone else at some point. You know, given that I wanted streamers to be able to easily play on Uncletopia, given that a decent chunk of my audience is likely underage, and you can probably guess why I decided to disable sprays. I mean, Valve doesn't allow sprays on their own servers. I mean, I think that says enough. Next, I decided to disable teammate player collision, an idea that I pulled from the third-party competitive scene, but mainly that it's often frustrating when rude players use the player collision to shove people off of teleporter entrances or to grief others in various ways. And more subtly, being able to nudge teammates can sometimes inadvertently adjust your aim, which is frustrating when it does happen, so turning off player collision seemed like a pretty easy rule to add.
What?
Now, getting into more technical stuff here, SV Pure 1 is enabled in order to allow things like custom view model animations, something that I personally enjoy using. A few other changes taken directly from the competitive scene include things like being able to explosive jump at the start of the round, which encourages players to do those flashy rollouts to mid. There are a few bug fix mods, such as Medic's crossbow arrows passing through teammates at close range, or fixing various ramp slide issues, all of which is borrowed from competitive TF2 servers, and that's pretty much it. Those are all of the rules that I wanted to implement into what I'd consider to be a slightly more refined version of the TF2 casual experience. The last thing on the docket before I delivered the very first Uncletopia server to the masses was to choose the map pool. Now, in the past, I've expressed my opinion that there are simply too many maps in TF2, and most people generally queue up for the same 20 or 30 maps when they play casual mode, so I didn't at all feel like I should be adding the entirety of the TF2 map list. And remember, I'm in selfish mode here. I wanted to be able to join my own TF2 community server at any time, and I wanted to guarantee that the server would be playing a map that I personally liked. So that's where I started. I basically just copy and pasted my saved map preferences for casual mode onto Uncletopia, and that was pretty much it, except for two major differences: Badwater and Viaduct. Alright, so for ages, community servers have featured pro versions of maps, which are edits to vanilla maps that intend to correct balance changes. But it turns out there are a few problems with pro maps that I hadn't considered until I began to play full 12v12 casual matches of TF2 on them on a regular basis. First of all, most pro maps are not designed for casual TF2 to begin with. Maps like Badwater Pro and Product specifically are intentionally designed for 6v6 competitive and 9v9 Highlander mode. Once you have 24 players on these maps, the tiny balance changes like putting a staircase here or putting a connector there, they don't really matter as much. Second of all, who is to say that the edits made to pro maps are even based on anything grounded in balance? Most pro maps are not made by pros, and a lot of them aren't made by experts in map design. At the end of the day, these edits and additions to maps that have been beloved by many for over a decade were ultimately made by some person, and everyone just accepts that pro maps are somehow automatically better. In the end, I decided to revert the couple of pro maps that I had featured in the beginning back to their vanilla versions because I felt that I was just delving too much into changing the TF2 developers' intended balance in ways that are not already provided by the game itself. Anyone can type in the command to remove random crits or to explosive jump at the start of the round, but TF2's vanilla maps are TF2's maps. They often have a lot more personal connection to the core experience of the game than a lot of elements within TF2's vanilla gameplay does, at least for me. Not to mention, any kind of custom map is something that every player's client has to download before they can join, which tends to slow down the process for connecting. And in general, putting players on a map that they recognize, but with tiny adjustments that they aren't accustomed to, only really serves to confuse players, and in my opinion, distracts from the experience. And while we're on the subject of maps, custom maps in particular have always been a point of contention that I feel extremely resolute in maintaining my stance on, and my stance about custom community maps is that most of them are pretty overrated. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that a huge majority of community-made maps are just not very well designed. And yes, there are definitely a few outliers that I think are overdue to be officially added into the game at this point, but please know that if I decide to add even one official map into the Uncletopia map pool, that will open the door for anyone to suggest the entirety of the Steam Workshop to be included in the rotation, and I would much rather people make suggestions regarding other things instead. But most importantly, regardless of my personal opinion on community-made maps, I wanted to keep in mind that Uncletopia will always be on a list alongside a massive amount of options to customize your TF2 experience. And if you look at how many community servers feature a massive amount of custom maps, or even how many community servers feature one map, 24/7. I knew right away that if Uncletopia was to copy that formula, sure, it might be the safest way to attract a player base, but it also would make Uncletopia not much different from the other options at players' disposal. In my opinion, the fact that Uncletopia features an entirely vanilla map pool, no pro, custom, or community-made maps, only the maps that you can select from the main menu when you boot up TF2, that would be enough to set Uncletopia apart from a large amount of community servers and therefore give Uncletopia a set role within TF2. So, after deciding all of this, with a modest 25 maps in the pool, the rule set decided, and the server booted up and ready to go, I did a few playtest sessions by posting the IP on Twitter and in my Discord, and after making sure the thing wasn't going to crash or anything, I advertised the servers at the end of a video, and from that point on, Uncletopia was officially a part of the Uncle Dane cinematic universe. Now, almost right away, whether it's because of the removal of random crits, the lack of certain maps, or just simply because the people who watch my videos are probably more predisposed to being interested in getting better at TF2, the general vibe of Uncletopia has always leaned more towards what people might call the tryhard side of the spectrum, so much that Array7 named this entire tier of the spectrum after the players who frequent my servers. And so, practically from day one, I had discovered that my assumptions were confirmed. There is an audience, a rather large and passionate audience at that, within the TF2 community that is interested in playing TF2 in a way that extends just past dicking around and trying to random crit bottle someone on 2-Fort. And that's definitely not to say that you don't have your fair share of goofy, spontaneous, casual moments on Uncletopia. In fact, that is entirely unavoidable. It's built into the soul of TF2 to be a funny and chaotic game. But the main difference between Uncletopia and casual mode is mostly that there are considerably less players who literally just installed TF2 that morning, and there are considerably more players who are familiar enough with the game to where they would go out of their way to join a community server. Over the course of the past year, likely through word of mouth combined with TF2 players seeking refuge from casual mode for one reason or another, Uncletopia servers have remained completely full, often necessitating that I keep buying more and more servers to accommodate for the growing community. And honestly, because the server is maintained by volunteer administrators like my friend Roto, who develops moderation tools, manages the Uncletopia GitHub, and even designed the Uncle Dane website from the ground up, as well as a team of volunteer moderators who enforce server rules to keep the bigots, homophobes, transphobes, cheaters, script kiddies, and the like off the streets of Uncletopia, I've been feeling more and more like Uncletopia is beyond me, Uncle Dane, at this point, and it's now its own entity, existing without my direct influence. And that's awesome. I'm sure that by now there are a sizable number of regular players on Uncletopia who have never even seen one of my videos, and quite possibly don't even know who I am, and only initially joined the Uncletopia community because the servers are consistently populated, has a friendly community, and is ultimately just fun to play on. And honestly, that's all I could have ever asked for when starting that one server back in May. I intentionally have kept Uncletopia running without ads, without any kind of in-chat or on-screen branding or messaging, without any VIP system, no seed bots, no donator perks, no regular player benefits, no cosmetic mods, no major balance changes, or any custom additions to the base game of TF2, nothing like that. Not only because I personally dislike those kinds of things about other community servers myself, but also because I believe that, weirdly enough, the thing that sets Uncletopia apart from the other community servers is that the experience is very similar to the experience that you'd find in a game of casual mode. All I really did was remove the bullshit. That is the intended Uncletopia experience that I've come to enjoy alongside everyone else who frequents the servers. Casual TF2 matches where teamwork is important, teammates and enemies alike who aren't all pushovers and provide just enough of a challenge to keep things interesting, and a community of funny, accepting, and friendly players. That's it. I completely accept and encourage anyone who is looking for a different experience than that to play elsewhere, and there are definitely many great options in the community server browser to pick from. But my goal with Uncletopia from the start, and what will continue to be the goal with Uncletopia for the foreseeable future, will be to provide a specific yet broadly accepted TF2 environment that anyone can fall back on when they feel up to it. Too many community servers, in my opinion, try to be everything to everyone all at once, and it just ends up alienating people and overcomplicating things to the point where it just doesn't work. I don't believe that what people want from TF2 is all that complicated. Most people just want to play the game in the way that they want to play it at that particular moment, and if there's a server out there that can scratch that itch, they're going to connect. And that's why I think it's awesome that there are so many niche community servers out there, because if you want to play prop hunt, you can join a prop hunt server. If you want to play Saxton Hale or a ×10 crits randomizer, you can do exactly that. But what I think has been missing from the options for a while has been exactly what Uncletopia provides. Just casual TF2. No bullshit, no ads, no bots. Simple, effective, and in a time in TF2's lifespan where undisrupted casual mode games are harder to come by than usual, it's sorely needed. Now, this is the part where I would definitely suggest that more people do what I did and start their own TF2 community server that is easily self-sustaining and consistently populated, but I know that's totally unrealistic and easier said than done. So I'll just go ahead and admit it. I just so happen to be uniquely situated in a position where I can host TF2 servers. The money I make from my TF2 videos is more than enough to manage server costs, not to mention I receive the occasional donation for keeping them running, despite donations never being required and providing zero benefit for doing so. I have a large enough audience to where I can get the ball rolling for populating the servers, and word of mouth combined with people just joining from the server browser when Uncletopia inevitably floats to the top of the list keeps them full. And I just so happen to already be longtime friends with people who not only were interested in server administration, but who are well equipped to manage a server array of the size that it's grown to. So yeah, I'm definitely at a massive advantage over any regular Joe when it comes to setting up and hosting your own TF2 server community, but on the off chance that anyone else out there is either already in the position to be able to do something like this or can do so. From my experiences so far over this past year, I feel like Uncletopia has been a majorly beneficial addition to the TF2 community overall, if only for proving firsthand that you don't really need to jazz up a TF2 server with all these bells and whistles to make it worth playing on for most people. Most people like TF2. Most people just want to play TF2. If you give them that, they'll play it. And a lot of the time, there's just no need for in-game donation incentives, ads, on-screen branding, anything like that. All it really takes is a handful of donations from people who just feel like chipping in because they like the server, and you're golden. You know, unless you just want to turn a profit off of running a TF2 server, which in that case, maybe you don't really have a good incentive to run a TF2 server in the first place. Maybe I'm out of the loop here or something, but I assume there has to be a much better way of making money than to host a TF2 server with ads on it. I don't know, but as Uncletopia exists right this moment, it's serving its purpose for the players who frequent it and provide an option for people who are interested in it. But I'd be a fool to not recognize that 11 servers on 2 continents is not the best that we can do. I admit, I have struggled for a while with whether I wanted to accept the full responsibility of my suddenly acquired role as a legitimate game server manager. I mean, think about it, I'm just some YouTuber. Like, being the owner of one of the most popular TF2 community servers is not something that I was really prepared to lean into. Not to mention, my resilience against ever attempting to require or incentivize donations from players starts to conflict when I'm thinking about rising to the same reach that other servers with Uncletopia's player count have. But over time, I've come to realize that Team Fortress 2 and its community has given me so much. It's allowed me to do what I love as a career. It's provided me with almost 10,000 hours of entertainment over the course of almost 10 years now. Even if it's not the most financially lucrative venture to take part in, I consider it worth it just for the greater good at this point. So starting right now, Uncletopia will not just have 11 servers. Today, we've increased that amount to 25, doubling up on most existing locations. And with the increase in servers comes an increase in locations. There will also now be Uncletopia servers not just in North America and Europe, but in South America and Australia as well. Now, I have no idea if this change will even be beneficial to the Uncletopia servers, as my main worry would be that it would spread the player base too thin and servers will be full less often. But hopefully it solves the issue of long waiting times getting into a server, which is hands down the most popular complaint that I've gotten over the past year. And ideally, it will provide more players all over the globe with a TF2 experience that they might have been too geographically distant from to participate in. And, you know, who knows, maybe next week Valve will release an update that completely solves the bot crisis in casual mode, and there will be less incentive to play on community servers in general. But even if Uncletopia becomes less populated over time, we can always cut back to concentrate the existing player base better. I'm totally down to roll with the punches and react to whatever Uncletopia needs to keep going. And I've always maintained that donations will never be required to fund the server costs, and I intend to keep it that way. As I see it, Uncletopia is pretty much indirectly funded by this YouTube channel, and if you want to support the servers financially, all you really have to do is keep watching my videos. But if players still feel like donating out of the kindness of their heart, the option is obviously still available to them in order to help take take the edge off a little bit. We've streamlined the financial support process by setting up a Patreon that players can choose to subscribe to, the tiers for which offer no in-game benefits but will set you up with a special role in the Uncletopia Discord. And in the future, we may have better ways of recognizing our donors in unobtrusive, appropriate ways outside of the TF2 servers themselves. So I hope that everyone who's been along for the ride this past year, as well as anyone still interested in checking out the servers for the first time, is down to roll with the punches along with me for as long as it lasts. Anyway, thanks for listening to my little story about this project and hearing out my insights into decisions behind the scenes. And if you want to check out Uncletopia, the link to the server page is in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you nieces and nephews next time. Bye-bye.